In 2013, thousands of Ukrainians came to Maidan, aka Independence Square, to protest against the tyranny of Yanukovych's authorities. This was the beginning of irreversible changes in the state. The Revolution of Dignity became the platform where initiatives on how to change the power system appeared.
Це був той час, коли люди надзвичайно швидко.
It was a time when people were ready to help each other, cooperate, and forget about old grievances or different points of view, and work together for the sake of the country's future.
Спільно працювати на майбутнє.
In such terrible battles on Institutska Street, Hrushevsky Street in Kiev, the idea of how to change the system was born. Most activists back then had no doubt that we would win and Yanukovych would just have to leave. Then in January, for some reason, there were no thoughts that the Revolution of Dignity would actually result in Ukraine being invaded by the Russian Federation. Putin did not understand that Ukrainian society had changed, and we don't want the Russian world or Asian economic space here. Today, Ukraine really is different than it was 5 years ago. The state is continually changing and new reforms are continuing to be introduced. The main achievements include the signing of the association agreement with the EU, resumption of economic growth, introduction of a visa-free regime with EU countries, receipt of the tomos for autocephaly, and the creation of a local United Orthodox Church of Ukraine. And reform of the police service, decentralization, and the civil service have all been successful. In 2015, we suffered a 10% fall in the country's gross domestic product. Now growth exceeds 2.5%. This is also very important, since it is taking place in conditions of ongoing Russian aggression. There is replenishment of gold in foreign exchange reserves. Energy sphere is being improved. Diversification of nuclear fuel supplies is being introduced. Today, society plays an important role in reforming the state. More than 80 independent non-governmental organizations and 22 expert groups appeared in Ukraine recently, which are representatives of the new post-reform generation of reformers. They are the ones who set the tone for reforms, work with Western partners in monitoring reforms, and receive professional support. A great deal really has been done. It was done thanks to the efforts of civil society, perhaps even above all. It has brought people into politics and produced its own groundwork. I remember the law on public service broadcasting. By the way, during the Yanukovych era, some work on the draft bill on public broadcasting still continued. Many of my colleagues said that it wasn't the time for this bill, and asked why we were doing it, and said the bill would never happen.
Я і Тарас, до речі, ми казали, ні, треба зробити, треба, щоб в нас був законопроект.
But it was one of the first bills that we managed to adopt, simply because a lot of the groundwork had already been done.
Було вже велике напрацювання.
Experts say that in 2014, Ukrainian politics exhausted itself in terms of personnel and ideology. Therefore, the influence of civil society on politics has proved to be quite effective. In Ukraine, civil society is much stronger than institutions, even stronger than the political class as such. And it's obvious that the only way to change the country was to regroup to some extent the resources of civil society into this political dimension, if we really wanted these changes to happen. The policy of national memory is also a successful example of public participation. After all, the issue here is various kinds of public initiatives, which then became known as decommunization. On April 9, 2015, the Ukrainian parliament adopted a package of laws on decommunization, which prohibits Soviet symbols and condemns the communist regime. According to the law, all streets and settlements in the state which are connected with the communist regime should be renamed, while monuments from the totalitarian era should be dismantled. The independent public organization called the Reanimation Package of Reforms, which has been the driving force of reforms in the state for the last 5 years, appeared. It seems to me that such initiatives as the Reanimation Package of Reforms are a tool for continuing Maidan, because I consider effective reforms as a continuation of the Maidan movement, the continuation of this revolution. Maidan created the opportunity for us to realize certain ideas which had developed in previous years.
Протягом цих 5 років
During these 5 years, the Reanimation Package of Reforms Coalition has demonstrated successful examples when the public can influence the formation of the agenda. The fact that the Reanimation Package of Reforms appeared on March 7th, thanks to people who had thought about it earlier, even during Maidan, actually provided it with such a startling uniqueness.
Майдану, власне, і забезпечив його таку стартову унікальність.
The Reanimation Package of Reforms plans to acquire legal status to become a public association called the Reanimation Package of Reforms Coalition. This decision was made at the meeting of the members of the organization on March 5th, 2019. Many experts who have left this organization are currently working in public institutions where they continue to implement reform ideas and practices. The greatest merit of this public association is that it became a bridge, and you can even say a springboard, through which both people and ideas got into big-time politics.
Ми не маємо закривати очі на те,
We shouldn't forget that in actual fact Maidan is still continuing. Unfortunately, there are many things we could not achieve.
і для мене
And for me personally, even the media sphere and judicial reforms are a challenge.
чудова реформа.
The key task for public organizations are to help state institutions to reform the country, despite the Russian aggression and annexation of Crimea, to unite the interests of not only individual experts but also large and small public organizations, in order for Ukraine to become a state with a fair justice system in which there will be no opportunities for corruption, where the authorities and political parties will be effective and accountable to the public.